States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, sorry, Jim. Mrs. Lemon? Here. Mr. Lonick?
Here.
Mr. Metalli?
Here.
Mr. Price? Mr. Shalinski? Mrs. Secco?
Here.
Mr. Taz?
Here.
Mrs. Walsh?
Here.
And Mrs. Lonick Snatcher.
Here. Any public comment? All right, budget and finance, Mr. Taz, take it away.
There is there's discussion, I guess. What's our discussion?
The discussion this evening is on the expenditure side of the budget.
Okay.
So- This is a publicly advertised Budget and Finance Committee meeting, which is what enables us all to have a quorum of the board actually this evening. There will be no action on anything tonight, but it's just an information session. Over the past several years, we've done budgeting various ways in terms of sharing information with the board and by extension the public, whether it's been multiple evening meetings or in this case a single meeting, just to talk about a little bit about the process. And in a few moments, Jamie will talk through the slides that she has in front, that you have in front of you, and they're entitled the expenditure side. Obviously, there's more to that. There's a revenue side to the budget, and then there's the expenditure side. A few months ago, back in November, there was some discussion at the board meeting about certain costs and things like that. So we've really kind of trying to consolidate everything, at least in this discussion, into the expenditures. Though we'll talk a little bit about millage and things like that. So just to kind of give you a refresher, budgeting in the Commonwealth works July 1 through the end of June. That's our fiscal year. And when it comes to taxation, we're governed by something called Act 1. And Act 1 really limits millage in terms of how much you can increase taxes if you were to increase taxes. I don't know how they work the formula, but they work the formula, and we're given a percentage. If we were to raise the taxes, we can go all the way up to that amount. Now, if you go back, probably more than 10 years at this point ago, a school district used to be like any other taxing body. They could raise their millage as much as they wanted. They didn't necessarily, but if you ever found yourself in dire straits, you bit the bullet, you're right-sized, and then you moved forward. School districts can only go to an index, so the important thing to remember about that is you can't right-size. So when you forego, for example, a tax increase now, you lose that increase every year because you can't then make it up the next year. You have a new index next year and the following year, so that's really important to remember when you're thinking in terms of do we want to raise taxes or not, because you are limited there. This month, I guess, you approved a budget, but that budget was really it's a cobbled together budget that you have to have in place and accepted if you want to apply for exceptions to the index. So the board gave Jamie direction about applying for exceptions, and there are, Jamie, what are the reasons we can get for exceptions if you were
Retirement, special ed expenditures. We've never done the construction option. Usually we are approved for, usually it's retirement or special ed.
So what you're saying, and it allows you to go a little more with it, but to do that, you have to be granted the exceptions, and Jamie went through that process after you applied. Did you make application yet? It's not open yet. So that's really where we are in terms of it. So what you're going to see today, Jamie will lead you through. It's really kind of the view at 10,000 feet of some of our expenditures. What are the big ticket items that are in our budget? We did a little more granular in terms of some things with athletics and with cyber costs and things like that. and just also show a projection of where we are in terms of taxation and millage and things like that. The real budgeting work will now begin between, as I actually started, and then it'll end in June. You have to approve the final budget, and you have to, and Jamie always gets on me about the wording that I use, but I just say approve, the budget. You also set the tax rate for the year. But you have to do a preliminary in May, and then there has to be a 30-day window. If you recall back last year, we had to recess and reconvene in June because we didn't have 30 days between the May meeting and the June meeting. So you'll approve one in May, we'll go 30 days, and you'll approve the final. There has to be a budget by the end of June. You don't have a choice. The funny thing about that is there are many times when the state does not have their budget done yet. So we don't even know what our subsidy is gonna be, and you're trying to plan a budget, and the state can keep going without a budget. And we have one approved, and we're opening, I think it was my first year, maybe, that they didn't go into September, October, maybe even November, before the state approved a budget. We didn't have money coming in. Now, I don't remember, did we borrow money that year just to cover us? I don't think we had to do that. We were fortunate that we did, but there were districts that actually had to borrow money just to cover payroll in those first couple months until tax money started coming in. So we don't know where we're gonna be on that. The governor's preliminary numbers kind of are out there. And you know how that is, it's pie in the sky. He's very education friendly. It's a little different than what's going on a national scene right now. I don't know how the national scene is gonna affect us here at the local level. But that's kind of my introduction, and I'm gonna just turn it over to Jamie, and we'll just have an open discussion.
Yes, anybody has any questions, please? You ready? Hold on to your hat. Okay, I'm just gonna go through these slides. Like, again, we put together some information we thought were, again, big ticket items or things we thought you might wanna know. Right now, in that preliminary budget, I think I told you that all I know is the contractual obligations, which are the salaries, so that's, the teacher salaries would increase about 166,000, support staff about 51,000. I have a meeting on April 4th. I'll find out what the Blue Cross Blue Shield, our insurance increases are. They're saying 9, 5, and 5, so I'll find that out for sure on April 4th. Retirement is going up, not much. It was 34, went to 33.9, now it's going back to 34, so they're not really killing us there, but, I mean, 2009 it was 4.76, you can see how much that's gone up in the last few years. We have one anticipated teacher retirement at the end of this year that we will anticipate replacing. We did have 2 positions retire in December, one teacher already replaced, and that 93, which was already replaced as well. Salaries, I'll have to budget salaries for that for next year, but they might be at a lower step then.
Jamie, may I ask a question
Sure.
on that page? What is the percentage, the contractual obligations for the increase in salaries? I appreciate seeing big numbers there. I'm just
You mean an overall percentage of the total?
No, what does the contract say? So the salaries, I mean, if I'm even asking the right question, the salaries are increasing by X amount here. Is that, like, if you look at all of the salaries for the teachers, does this represent, like, I don't know, 2%, 5%, 7%? Like, are they, I'm sorry, in the contract?
It's like steps,
Yeah,
So
which
it's just
some of them are
every-
jump
everybody.
steps, so it could be,
Okay.
I can't really give you,
No,
say
thank you.
3%,
I just had to be
2.5%.
reminded that it was steps.
That's
Yeah.
over
Thank
all
you
the
very much.
teachers, correct?
Yes.
It's 166,000
That's-
across,
yes.
for all the teachers.
For who
out
we
there.
have now, I mean, if
Okay.
they're,
Thank
So,
you.
so when we went through, that's a great question, Mr. Walsh. When we went through contract negotiations, there's the percent that payroll goes up every year, but then there's what's considered a pay raise. So everybody's salary goes up regardless because they're going from this to the step. So there's step movement, and then there's a percent raise of the steps in the new contracts.
Thank you.
That's kind of why it's so bizarre, but I can at some point pull you, when we originally negotiated the contract, when you'll read in the paper, teachers settle for a 5% increase or 10%. I'll pull that matrix out at some point, the numbers will be off a little bit because of retirements and stuff, but it'll give you an idea.
Jamie, what happened since 2009 for the cruisers?
What happened?
Yeah, why is it going, we're up 30%?
The governor's pulling money from one spot to fill,
Yeah,
he
that's
pulled from
like-
teasers,
Yeah.
that he pulled it, and that's why there's, the teasers are kind of, it was fully funded in like 2000, 2004.
Yeah, but now they have to invest that money.
And they've been pulling it, and then never, no one's, the governor's never replaced it, as they've come through.
But told us we had to, correct?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Told us it was our job to replace them.
So when Jamie builds when she builds the budget, she'll build it she'll build it on the current payroll, and then there'll be some savings realized when folks retire, or, because we don't know what we'll bring, say the replacement for the one that's retiring, we don't know what that person will come in for the first step, a second step, a third step. So you anticipate for where they are, and then you really realize that savings actually a year out, because you don't know the person. And that 34%, that's of every dollar of salary,
That's
correct,
based
Jamie?
off of salary, yes.
So, you know, if you think about that for a moment, and we started breaking this down,
We get part of that back as well.
well, we did like
The
half
state-
or 16%.
It's about half, yeah.
But when you're thinking in terms of a salary, and you think not only the payroll benefits, but you think in terms of the healthcare, and then you add that 34%, you know, somebody at the top of the scale that's making slightly over $80,000, by the time you add all this, the rest of this in there, if you're on family benefits and things like that, you're well over probably $120,000 just for one person. So it's just important to keep in mind.
The next page, our contract with Airmark, the facilities, per contract, they can increase more than 4%, for next year. They haven't told us what that percentage will be yet, so we're still waiting to hear from that. That's the food service budget. I should be getting that information from Airmark probably in the next few weeks, because you'll have to either approve them or go out to bid again, so that renewal has to be done. I have to have their numbers into, Department of Food and Nutrition by the end of March, so I'll be getting those pretty soon.
And the Airmark facility side, that, where we don't, when we negotiated this last contract, I mean, they wanted it specifically in there to go with the consumer price index. At the time, the CPI was kind of high. And so we negotiated a cap of 4%. Consumer price index, up until a couple of years ago, never even reached 4%. But then, I think when we negotiated, if I recall correctly, when we negotiated the 4%, it was actually higher than that. So we at least got that cap. I think, I met with the facilities end last week, and I think it's below 3% right now. That's something you can look up and find out where it is. And then food services, that's a whole other kind of,
What's included in that, Jamie, the food service? that-
Any estimates they have for meals served, pricing, meal prices, it's a standard PDF document that PD has online that they have to complete for us, and I have to submit it, so it takes into consideration any kind of other à la carte, and anything served in the food service. It's kind of their budget, what they think they're gonna make
And
or sell.
let me know if I'm not correct here. We lose money on every meal served because we will not set the price of what it actually costs us to feed kids. Because we think that'll be a financial hindrance on the community. So we raised it slightly this
Last
year,
Yeah.
but
I wanna
it's
say
still,
10 cents.
I think Hal said something, like it'll cost almost $8 for us to feed a kid per meal, and we charge like $3.65, I think, if Lucy gets meals that much. So we lose money on every meal. I don't think people realize that.
Yeah.
So there are some districts, and we heard a little bit about this at the beginning of the year, that why aren't we offering free meals to all students? And the way the math works, and Hal does it every year, he'll do it again for next year, and if we can, we will. We would have to make up the difference between what we get subsidized and what the meal costs. And we're losing money as it is in food service. So yeah, that's.
Was this when, did Hal say something about this, when there was some survey that had to do with, the financial, picture pressure of the families that make up the district, and people wouldn't respond to the survey. And so we had a chance to be subsidized at a higher rate, but we couldn't get the response. And so, you know, people are private about their information or what have you, and am I remembering that
I think-
correctly?
Yeah.
There are certifications, yes,
Yeah.
and a lot of it is direct certified, but a lot of it is the parents have to fill
Go
out.
ahead and fill out the,
They have.
the application for free.
We need, I think, at least 60% to be.
I
I
know,
don't think-
it's not even that high.
hard.
It's not quite that high, but we're not at it.
No,
I thought it was higher. the last
no,
time.
it's like almost, I think it's 50%, if that.
I'll tell you,
I know
I
we
went
fluctuated
through
close.
to try to apply just to see, it's time consuming and it is confusing.
The
And if-
parents' paperwork?
It's all online through the
Okay.
state. It's a lot, Teresa. And I was like, I'm gonna do it just to
Yeah.
see like why people aren't and if you're not computer savvy, it's probably even harder.
So it wasn't something that they just had to return to us, it was a step they had to take themselves online, okay.
Yeah.
Well, I know at one point that if it was paper form, that there was, somebody at the school actually helped them fill it out. I don't know if it was a guidance counselor or somebody,
I think that
when it was in elementary.
I think Hal's always available to help. them
Hal's
fill out.
always available. If I understand correctly, the secretaries in the elementary school have always offered.
I thought,
To
yeah,
families.
somebody,
I know Shelby used to, so I'm assuming that's still happening up there. They used to do it at the library in Burgettstown, offer for people to stop in and they would help them there. But I think it's like Teresa said, it's a very personal thing.
It's a lot of
and-
pride, that
and
it's
they-
hard.
Yeah.
And I
So
think
I
at
think
one
that
time-
feeds into it.
it was concerned of parents that their information was gonna be shared, or that their kids, people would know that their kids were free or reduced lunch, and that's actually not the case when it's gone through. People don't realize, nobody knows except for a select people that have to know that they're on free or reduced lunch. And I think that's a misconception too, that they think it's everybody's knowledge in the school, that they get that free or reduced, and it's not. It's a pride thing, I completely understand where they're coming from.
I'm not even sure, Jamie, would you know, I'm sure I could access it if I wanted,
But I
don't
think
even know
there's
where
only
I
like
would
one or
access
two
that
people
money,
at
right?
most that
How?
have that
Yeah.
And
information.
maybe Jamie.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
people that are at the cafeteria that take the payments
No.
or that they
Right.
do that, they don't even know if a child has reduced or free lunch. And I think if people knew that it was more private, and
I think
that
that's
might be,
conveyed to them. I don't think that they're under the impression otherwise.
I don't know, a lot of people think that the people that are checking, you know, when the kids sweat their things, that knowledge is right there. I mean, if they're not computer savvy enough and they don't know how to fill out the forms and everything, I wouldn't blame them for not having the knowledge that it's private.
I don't know. I was always under the impression that the secretaries, if they reach out to the
Absolutely,
family,
yeah.
that they explain
That they
all of
explain it
that.
to them.
Yeah.
But again, people have the misconception that it is knowledge to all the administrators and to all the people that work in the cafeteria who was free and who was reduced. And that when you go to pay for your meal, like when the kids enter their number or whatever, that just like my kid's balance comes up and what they have left, that they assume that they would know that they're free or reduced lunch.
I'm not positive on that, like.
Cause my kids can come home and tell me, hey, I need you to put more money in my account, they told me at lunch today that my account's low. So, if somebody hears that, just another person hears it behind the kids, how are they gonna say, well, I don't want them to know I get free lunch? When those people access that to those, but they don't have access to everything. Cause, I'm sorry, Mr. Pushkar, I think we fluctuate in the poverty level in Burgettstown. I've seen it anywhere from like 42% to like a 46% at one time. I don't know if you would have that information handy now, but if I remember correctly, it was around the 50% mark that it had to be at for the entire district to get free lunch or free meals.
But I think there's more to the formula than that.
Yes.
Because
There
Kip
is,
and I sat
yeah.
down and it's
We didn't meet the
actually,
criteria.
it's actually
last
almost
time.
80% when you
It's-
figure out
There's
the
an,
whole
it
formula.
is 80%.
Is it
Yeah.
80%?
Yeah.
Well, that's not what we have to, I think our poverty level is like 40% or something,
Yeah.
but we need it to be higher than that to
Yeah, I
make
know
any
the poverty
There's a
level
big-
has to be a higher,
Convoluted
be around-
formula.
Between
when
70 and
Kip-
80 might be ideal,
Kip
but
and Dr. Walsh sat down and really looked at the formula once. And we were shocked that it actually is so much higher than 50%. When you figure out the entire formula,
yeah, I know it's not just based on
It's-
one thing, it's like a whole.
yeah,
But I
The-
know that at one time they said if more people applied for the free and reduced lunch, it would actually help us. Because even those people that don't pay their balances, those balances would then be paid. Those balances, like somebody that doesn't pay their balance at the end of the year, sometimes are written off, sometimes this side or the other. Or the people that they would send their kids if they had free and reduced lunch and they don't. They would much rather just send a kid with like a banana or something, whatever they have. That if we had more people that had free and reduced lunch, we would get reimbursed more. If that percentage went up.
So as a district, I mean, this is, these are the last reported on the Future Ready Index. For a district, we're at 44.2% economically disadvantaged. At the high school, we're only at 39%. And at the elementary, we're at 50%, which goes back, which I believe with what Hal said, we're closer at the elementary.
yeah,
than
or you can do one building and not the other. You don't have to do the whole district.
And the free and reduced lunches isn't your whole meal's not free, but the a la carte items you still have to pay.
Yeah, the à la carte, but I'm just saying like the main base
Yeah,
meal.
basically.
Yeah.
What is the poverty level?
currently,
Yeah.
it's always between like 43
No,
and 48%.
what's the, not percentage, what's like the
Income.
income level?
Probably between 14 and 17,000.
It's,
Okay, page 4 is the IU operating budget that I think you approved last month.
Sorry, Jamie, I had one more on that
Yeah.
last one. Was the difference from 23-24 budget for Airmark and, sorry, 23-24 and 22-23, is that just because of the funding from federal?
I'm gonna say that's food costs,
That much,
probably a combination of everything, but
went up $113,000 in a year.
probably food costs, containers, that kind of stuff.
yeah,
This is
I mean,
true.
just,
Yeah,
That's what
Yeah.
COVID funding ended too.
So that's what I was
Yeah.
wondering, if it was the
Yeah.
COVID funding or not, if it was just
Hardly.
general.
And I have a feeling this
Inflation,
next
too.
year, it's just gonna go up even more.
Better put an agricultural program in, if we start making our own food again.
and start raising chickens instead of turkeys.
Yep.
Right?
Oh, my.
Can I ask one question?
Because that would make terms.
What does facilities, what do they do, Aramark for us?
So.
As far as facilities?
So a couple of things, they manage, so Craig's position is through Airmarks. And then all of the supply of anything that we need from a custodial standpoint.
I see,
So it's not the maintenance end of things, it's the custodial end.
I see.
And then Airmark then owns all of the equipment. So the scrubbers and the buffers and the buckets and the mops and all of that kind of stuff is all through Airmark. Now, I've never done a study
Custodians are
on
our
it.
employees,
And
though.
yes, the
They're not
custodians are
our
our
employees.
employees.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
So I've never done a study here, actually, I've never done a study anywhere about whether it would be more cost effective to bring it in-house. But if we were, then you figure then we'd need a facilities director. And then, things like you add the Peasers on top of that and all,
Right.
And then we'd then have to start from scratch and as far as everything else goes.
Right.
So,
Okay.
So
I
there
just
are,
didn't know what they did for
Yeah.
us.
so there are employees, but Craig oversees it.
Correct. Well, Craig and by
Craig is
extension.
not, Craig is an Airmark employee, but
He's
all the
not ours, so-
custodians and our maintenance person.
that's
is-
how Hal is too.
Yeah, yeah.
That's the cafeteria set up the same way.
We tried to do food service going around about 8 years ago, and we lost more money than we did now, so that's why we went back to
Right.
a company.
Some considerations that I have in the preliminary budget, we keep putting in the half-time maintenance person. Gonna keep a new bus in there, if that's what our plan is. Mr. Pushkar at his meeting had, grant writing service some opportunity there. And then we'll have to absorb any expenses that our PESR was paying for, so that's mostly curriculum, and there's some books, some subscriptions, anything like that, computer, Chromebooks, that kind of thing.
So when you, the reality is, when you go through our budget, and Jamie will get to a slide in here that there's a pie chart later on that talks about what percentage of the budget is available for everything else. So 70 to 80% of a school district's budget is salary and benefits. So then the rest of it goes for everything else. But when you look at things like the consumable, when you look at any of the what we consider extra spending, there's really not a lot of fluff of anything in our budget. So when you talk about what's in the budget for next year, there's certainly a lot more than these things. But these are things that we look at every year, say, okay, can we afford to put another new bus in, for example? 2 years ago, because we had some ARPESR money, we were able to have that halftime maintenance position in. That helped. It's not in there this year. We'd like to put it back in, but it's difficult also to find that, just a halftime person in maintenance. The grant writing services, this is just, and it's not in the budget yet, but I was at a meeting at the IU last week, and there is a superintendent out east that also works for a consulting company with grants, and they have a direct tie-in with the governor's office, and their fee per month is really, actually, their annual fee is probably about $25,000. And what they then do is they go after the grants. I mean, they can go after the grants that we go after, but, you know, a lot of those we're okay on, but they'll go after, like that competitive one for $5 million. They'll go after it in kind of a different way. They'll also go after other funds that are out there that, you know, sometimes you'll share some things with me, you know, so.
I mean, all they have to do is get 1 or 2 grants to cover the cost.
To cover the cost.
That's all you know about that.
And what's good about this is that it's a set cost, and I have to get more information on these, this was just a presentation to us. It's not fee contingent. So, you know, some of the grant writers out there, they want 10% of whatever they write or whatever. This is not that way, and I believe they'll structure it such that, you know, as long as you go through like say maybe like a quarter, and if you don't like the services after that, you can kind of walk away. I wouldn't want something that would have us into it past a year, but I think if we can get a year of seeing what's out there, because we have the needs, you know, and I'm frustrated with like that facilities grant from last year. It just frustrates me, so I have to wonder, okay, maybe there's somebody that has the expertise to do that. So I just wanted to put that on your radar. This last part about we will need to absorb expenses that were previously covered by ARPAND or ARPESR, those are the COVID funds. The reality is, in this year's budget, there's very little that was ARPESR funded. So over the past several years, that pot of money has been reduced, and we made sure that we spent it all. Where Burgettstown did it a little differently, and probably a good thing, is that we didn't spend it all on things that we knew if that money went away, we would have to make up for all of it. We have to make up for some of it. But for example, when we did new laptop computers, in a worst case scenario, you didn't want to do laptops again, you're going to mess up your cycle, you could do that if you had to. When we did the ViewSonic boards that are in all the classrooms, that's kind of a one-time expense. Now, 5 years from now, or 7 years from now, or 10 years from now, when they go obsolete, we've got an issue again. You know, that's for anything with technology. But we think we're sitting okay in terms of the ARPESR money has all gone away. We have to make up the costs because we know where those costs went.
And the next page just kind of lists some of the expenses that we
Right.
did use.
Yeah, and
ARPESR for.
I mentioned some of those things.
The next couple are just some graphs showing what percentage of our budget is, as you can see, regular instruction, debt service, student activities, transportation, and then down the line. But the largest chunk is regular instruction.
So So the way the codes are built in the budget, there are certain items that they tie back to instruction. So when you look at that, that's that. But the next one, it shows the personnel salaries and the benefits and then the others. So that's just overall by object. So you can look at us, we have a budget of 25 point some million dollars. If you divided that by, say, 1,000 students, that would give you a per pupil cost of what our entire budget is. But that's different than the instructional cost per student. And there's a formula that Jamie submits, and and that's how they get the charter school funding and all of that. So when you talk about cost per student, you don't go, it's just, it depends on how you want to present it, right? But we talk about instructional cost per student, right, where it's in here somewhere. So just kind of wanted to outlay that for you.
Yeah, and on the next chart, you can see how personnel and salaries and benefits, what a big chunk that is. The next page, some of the high cost items, again, the pension every year increases little by little. Students attending any outside cyber, we paid, I think, 1.3 million last year. Any out-of-district placements, 280,000. To transport, our Jake Snyder cost last year was 627,000. We're trying to reduce that number, but again, we can't find, bus drivers are hard to come by.
We did it, I mean, Cheryl did a pretty good job, I do have
Yeah,
to say that, she did do a good job of looking at all the routes and seeing, can we pull some vans back in and not have quite as many vans?
There are a lot of spots that can't,
And that's the
can't
other
go.
part, there are certain parts we just can't, even if we had the drivers, there are parts of our district we can't get to. But I also wanted to kind of draw attention to, and Jamie will get into this, I think, a little further in the cyber charter school costs. Yeah, I'll hold off until we get to that, Jamie, go ahead.
Okay. Next page is Western area. Right now, we have 62 students. They confirmed for me, so how we should budget, they base it on last year's ADM, so for next year's budget, I should budget for 62 students. And she told me the cost per student is $5,885.11. So I think that ends up like 360 some thousand, but they usually will give us that number here in the next month or two. But you'll approve that, I believe.
So it's almost like you're a year behind. So they do have the amount that you pay, but if you have so they have to build their budget at the same time kind of we're building our budget, right? So all you have to go off of is what the school district sent. So that's that amount that we approve. Now, if we don't, and we pay that up front, if the year comes to pass and there's not the equivalent of 62 students in this case, then you would get a reimbursement check on the back end. Similarly, though, if we were to exceed that amount of students, that we would have to make it right and owe them money. Most times, we don't owe them money.
No.
It's been a while, though, I think, since we've gotten any money
Yeah,
back, too.
we
It's
haven't really had
spot
either.
on.
Yeah.
Also, I want to add that those students are also considered Burgettstown students. It's
Right.
not like they're going to Lincoln or somewhere else where all of their money is going to them. We still get a percentage of money that if they were a student of ours, full-time.
Correct.
And part of that is just that they're getting paid Western Marion for the
Correct.
time that they're there.
Correct. So, when you think about it, $5,800 to send, now they're only going for part of the day, but, that's not bad tuition for coming out of school with
A job.
with a job or a
Right.
certificate,
Do you actually cut a check to them, Jamie, or does that get like held?
We pay them quarterly.
Okay.
Yep.
Can I go back on the transportation? I think Mr. Bushfire, you and I have talked about, we've just kind of been passing, like, have we ever looked at if it would be of any savings for us to have like vans of our own? Or is that the driver type like my van, you know what I mean? Or is that a
Why
driver
didn't they
shortage
change that?
situation?
What is the?
Do you need like a CDL to
Yeah,
transport
for so
students
many-
in that now?
Passenger, you have to have a
Can't go over
passenger.
more than like
Mhm.
six
Yeah,
people.
I did not know that.
And our hard.
I thought even for teen, like,
Yes.
taking
You
like.
would, you would,
Yeah, but we
you would
would
need three vans for the basketball team to go, yeah.
They changed all of
Yep.
the requirements for drivers and
That's
trans.
terrible.
It would still be nice to have a van, so the current, support staff contract, would then give the van, the drivers, they'd have to be the ones to drive it. We would wanna then look at, hey, how can we work with that particular union to say, okay, van drivers have this rate,
Yeah,
you know?
I was thinking even if it was a coach or something.
But then, what's good about that is, yeah, so let's go to the fall, when it's golf, and
Right.
you have to go and you don't have a bus to go because you don't have a driver, you can do that. Basketball, I mean, you'd need two vans going on.
Three,
At least,
Yeah, at
Probably
least,
three
because then you
for
have,
15 kids.
yeah.
If you can
It
have
would
the
depend on,
drivers.
certainly on the
then
size of the
passengers.
team, which way would be more, financially sound, but.
And here's the sad part. When I started here a little over 4 years ago, we paid about $88,000 for those buses. Try to get a van, a full-size van, they're putting for schools now for $88,000. It's sad.
Cheryl got us though, that grant that she wrote, how many buses did she get us?
Three.
She got us buses.
She
We
did.
got three for,
Three new buses,
I think
yeah,
for the price of two or something
Right.
like that it worked out.
yeah.
Yeah.
So
But they've not
she's-
pushed that anytime since.
Yes.
They were pushing the green.
She's always keeping an eye out to
Yeah.
see if she can find us something too.
We do have two students, at other districts for the VOAG programs. We have one at Fort Cherry, one at Avella. We used to have more at Fort Cherry, but thankfully they're both seniors, so if nobody else, seeks that avenue, we shouldn't have to budget for that next year.
So it costs us their whole tuition just to go for one program,
Yep.
for one class.
Well, no, they go
No,
there
they're
full time.
full-time.
Oh, they
They
go
go
full
there
time,
full
yeah,
time.
they're there,
Oh,
they're there.
okay.
Yeah,
Which
they're
is, they
full-
live in
they're
our
Fort
district,
Cherry
but they go to
students.
school there,
Okay.
yeah.
Do we have to transport them also?
I think we do.
I don't think we
do.
transport them. No.
And again, that's what our tuition rate is. And those are certified every May, so in May that will update. The next slide is for our cyber program. Maria gave me these numbers. We have currently 28 students enrolled in our cyber program. And the costs are $300 a course per semester. She said they're typically enrolled in 6 to 8 courses per semester. So an average student enrolled in 8 courses for the year would cost $4,800 plus the stipend of $650 per student.
So that compares to, so we can do a cyber offering for our students for a third of what the regular ed tuition rate is for a cyber school. And even, the special ed rate, well, the special ed rate's changing a little bit, Jamie will talk about that, but 28,000, so look at the money goes up per student. And I think folks don't realize that school districts, when cyber school, or when charter school, it's charter in general, when they advertise on the radio, first of all, they're advertising, I wish I had an advertising budget, right? But they're advertising, it's free to you to come to school. Well, sure, it's free to that family to go from the standpoint of they're not paying tuition, like if I send my student to, say, I don't know, Madonna or something, right? But it's costing the district that charter amount, so the district is paying it, so it's not free. And, it's just, the biggest thing is, and I don't know that you'll find most superintendents, I think, would tell you that choice isn't necessarily a bad thing, right? The problem is the flow of money, and we're held to a different set of standards. I know Mrs. Walsh, you said one of your children had a good experience in charter. And there are certainly those that have good experiences. But when you look at the overall achievement level of kids that are in cyber schools, it's worse than most public schools. And even if it's better, they're not held to the same standards that a district is held for, even in terms of how they spend the dollars. Just the fact that they can charge that kind of money to a school district and then still have enough money left over that they can put hundreds of thousands of dollars toward that.
Their advertising budget last year was $21 million, PA side.
I mean, that's just,
And we have to let them go to whatever class, whatever cyber school we want to, even though we provide them with one from the district.
you don't have a choice. Not only do you have, it's not even about letting them, you don't know when it happens a lot of times. You can just sign up. And, you know, Mrs. Monaco asked about the tuition for CPC, and we get a bill and we pay. The state grabs the money before you even get the subsidy. So the cyber schools let the state know how many students from this school district and what the tuition is. And before this, so I'll get these emails, I don't even know if it's monthly.
Usually it's every other month, that's when we get our subsidy.
We've attached, it's basically like wage attachment. We've attached your subsidy for this quarter for these schools, and
So we
it's,
spent 1.3 million last year on cyber school. Wow.
Can you imagine what
Cyber
we do?
charter.
Charter.
Cyber and charter.
Yeah,
It's
I mean that,
but we don't, so.
I think that's, and the way I explained it to my husband was, we raise our own taxes every year because the state allows this to happen. We raise our own taxes to keep the lights on, because these people, there's no standards, like he said. We don't even know where the money goes, other than it goes to cyber charter. We don't know what they're getting out of it.
I don't think
It's
that
crazy.
most people know this.
No,
They have no idea about this, so maybe we should put on a campaign of our own. We're spending 1.3 million on cyber school and charter schools, where we offer you our own
Well, they do, when they go to try to withdraw and get their transcripts, this is why we track this, in the weekly update that you get, the spreadsheet that Mr.
Mhm.
Pushkar provides. Amy and I asked him to start tracking that so that we could see our efforts being made when they reach out to Melissa or Maria Schaefer or Dr. Cook or Mrs. Mackey, whoever, what efforts are being made to tell them
To
about
retain
our cyber and retain them, so that we are retaining our tax dollars. So they are, when that happens, you've sat down with people, right, Melissa, that you explain to them, we have ours, here's how it works, you know, blah, 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 blah.
and my biggest complaint with it, is we need to fix whatever problem is causing the kids to leave. And
But it's not one problem.
it's not one problem, I understand that. But when you have 76 students enrolled outside of cyber and charter schools, 76 students when an average class, my kid's class, is about that average. That is a lot of kids. And I still think that it needs to be dug deeper and figure out why these kids are leaving.
Do you have any suggestions on how to fix that?
I've made multiple suggestions and they get shot down. And every person that I have talked to, that they have gone to cyber, the universal comment is bullying. And I know that that is a very hot topic, where what do you categorize as bullying, or what do you categorize as this? People don't understand how some of these things go down, and what we are allowed to do for discipline, what we're not allowed to do for discipline, how they see bullying, how we handle bullying. It just needs to be addressed differently. That's the universal thing that I hear from multiple kids that now go to cyber. And it's not just our school district. I see 40, 50 kids a day, and there's several of them that are in cyber school, that they can come anytime for an appointment or whatever. And we'll ask them, well, why did you decide to go to cyber? Universal answer.
I
We
think
were
the thing
bullied.
that I hear the most is actually attendance.
That's what
I know,
And
attendance
that's
is
a
an issue
problem.
too.
Because
And we do, and like I
that's
said,
just your
I would
laziness on
say,
the side.
I'm not saying 100% of it, but the high average number is because of bullying. And if you talk to parents, I guarantee if you sit down with these 76 parents and talk to them,
I think a lot of times they use that as an excuse as well.
I I
I'm
think
not saying
because.
that
I can
I'm
tell
not-
you
I'm
5
not
people right off the top of
disagreeing
my
with
head
you,
that
because
go to Burgettstown,
I
yeah.
do know that you're
It
right, that
is.
it is true.
But it's
I'm
a
not
bus
saying
But I
that
think
is
that
there are-
100%
there's
the
other-
reason.
stops the
that sometimes-
conversation as
yeah,
well.
But-
Exactly.
And I'm not saying that that's 100% the reason, but when it was discussed at a meeting that we had this discussion about the last time, I had parents come up to me the next day and throughout the rest of the week and said, I'm glad you said something because that was the issue that we had and that is why we left. And they feel as if it is getting brushed under the rug.
But
Now,
this is,
And I feel like too,
And I'm not saying it's
not in
all
every,
bullying.
I agree with you.
I'm not
It's
saying
in
it's all
every
bullying, I wanna
case, but
stress
think
that.
Sometimes people think the grass is greener
And it's not.
and it's not.
And but
We're
they're
not-
too proud to come
It's
back.
not unique to
And
Burgettstown,
there's-
we're
yeah,
not like.
And they're too proud to come back and admit that they were wrong. That's another thing too. But I'm not saying that the school district is wrong in how they're handling it. I wanna stress that as well. You're doing what you're supposed to be doing, you're following the guidelines. But a lot of these parents don't understand that if their child gets into a fight with another child that has an IEP or whatever, different things that happen, there are different levels of discipline for each one of those kids. And those parents don't see it as that, they see it as you're favoring that child. There's a disconnect and a lack of education in some of these parents and how it's handled. And a lot of these parents that have told me that.
yeah,
they've
that's,
left-
you can't
I
share
don't
that.
think we should get into that at a
Well, I'm
budget
just saying,
meeting
but that's the
because
reason why.
that is privacy laws.
It
going
is
on that we
100%.
shouldn't- But I'm saying we shouldn't be discussing that publicly.
I'm not discussing it privately or publicly, but I'm saying that if my child gets into a fight with someone, that he's being bullied, and my kid defends himself, he gets one discipline, that other kid gets another discipline because of a certain situation. That's a fact. That's state guidelines. They can't do anything about that to change that, and how certain things are handled. I'm not saying it's right or wrong.
How do you clear that
Exactly.
misinformation up without
How?
divulging
Yes.
other people's
A
personal?
blanket.
I don't know that you can, it's not a
But then
blanket
how
thing,
it- but-
everything is so individualized.
But do you understand where the misconception comes from? That if my child's treated
Well, I
differently,
absolutely do,
and
for sure.
to
But
me,
I'm not so
I
sure
don't
that an
disagree with you.
explanation, so, first of
But
all, I don't know how,
like Amy said,
we've
it's
talked about how do you put that in a
Yeah.
spreadsheet?
it's hard, and I know,
One
it's,
page.
it's been
I don't
something
know
I've
if you
been,
put,
we've talked about for years.
And I think Barb even advised against that.
I think if you, at what point would it be then providing apparent evidence with why
I know,
they're
it's
making
hard.
the decision? See?
I know, it's
You're
hard.
clearly telling me that there are two
No,
different
it's
standards, and that's my problem when you're saying there's a, we are following the rules. I think the peer conflict is an issue, right? Let's not call it bullying, let's call it peer conflict, because I think the term bullying gets overused.
Absolutely.
But I think that when you do things like we have 1.5 social workers, well, we have 2 social workers now. When we do things like the 7 mindsets, and you have the champs and everything down here, the character ed and all of that, and then you also work to establish a culture of trust and openness and things like that. That's how you combat a lot of times. And I think oftentimes what we see is, the people that are leaving because of attendance or because of, family situations. The
Oh, there's
teenagers
that.
that can stay home and watch.
Absolutely.
And we just
There's
talked a little
some that
bit ago
can
about
get jobs,
Right.
if they go and work and they can do their work in the morning and then go get a job. I'm not saying it's
You
100%
can do
that
that
reason.
enrolled as a student as well.
I understand that, but there's some that they do their work in the first hour and a half on PA Cyber at West Allegheny, they did it, and the kid has a job.
Burgettstown,
Yeah.
The real issue is the way the charters are funded. I mean.
It is, 100%, but I'm just saying,
You
the
know.
reasons that I've been told, multiple people, if it was 1 or 2, that's fine, but it has been multiple people, and the reason why they have left is they felt that their child was not heard, or that there was a bullying issue, and I know that term is used quite, largely, but I think there's a lack of knowledge out there about it.
So,
Like
Well,
Karen
on a
said,
plus
what
side-
do you
You
do?
can't do it, I know,
Let's-
it's,
so let's get back on the budget.
Oh.
Can we ask Rachel, because I know we talked to Barb about it before, but can you ask, Rachel might be best, cause she is.
So she does all our
yeah.
special ed stuff.
If it would be beneficial to send out some sort of blanket statement at all. I think we've been down this road a few times, but just ask again, please. Thank you.
If there's I'll do that, if there's a kind of a silver lining, you know, the 28, I'd like to think that we've kept 28 students from going charter. You know, and if we look at it that way, I don't know that they've obviously made that decision.
And I know one that was PA Cyber and went to our Cyber.
Yeah, a lot of them go to PA Cyber and end up failing out, or they get in trouble with the.
Well, they do, and then they come back later in
And
the
then
year.
they come back later on.
They already have their tuition
Absolutely.
money and they're behind.
Absolutely. It's
I think
just
we
not
could do
beneficial.
a good job of promoting, or a better job of promoting it. We have a new program that we're using. I know there are a lot of complaints with our old in-house cyber program. We have, success monitors where we have teachers assigned to the students so they can do check-ins if they're not doing their homework, if they're struggling. So maybe we can promote a little bit more program.
And I wanna
as
stress,
well.
this is not something that just occurred in the past couple of years. This is a conversation I had with Dr. Walsh multiple times in the past.
That was the old cyber program too, so.
Yeah, that was the old cyber program too, and it was also pre-pandemic.
Yes,
So,
absolutely.
and it was just as much of a problem then as it is now. Okay.
Yes, we currently do have 76 students enrolled in outside cyber charter, and that could change daily. I get, what Carl notices, I get enrollment forms on a daily basis from these schools.
So the money goes, because you said they get their check and then they come back, but then we don't get anything. So is it from beginning of the year is where the money goes to the regular school year?
Well, it's for their time that
It's
they're
their
enrolled.
days in session, basically, their days enrolled. If they come back here, then they're our student. I mean, they're
So
our
if they-
student, but
If they go the
The
first half of the
tuition's-
year, we pay 10,000, they're getting 10,000. The
It'll
school doesn't-
reconcile
They don't
at
get
the
the
end
other
of the year.
9,000, but it's just part of, it's back, in
Yeah.
we're not getting $9,000 back
it gets
either.
reconciled at the end of the year,
Yeah.
their invoice. So we'll pay for, if that student comes back, we'll pay for this student that was there for 40 days. So it'll work itself out. So there's a form that I have to complete, it's called a PD 363 to get our tuition rates for cyber charter schools. And these are our rates, 15,000 for regular ed, and special ed is 28,305. But they just changed that, this last budget, so starting January 1st, there's a reduced rate, and it's 23,000, it's about 24,000. So I believe how they're gonna do that, this is all new to us, so they're taking the difference between the two rates, and then they'll divide that by 12, and then multiply by however many special ed students that is, and to get the credit off of that.
So the original proposal, I think, last year was a flat rate of $8,000 per student per charter that they tried to get through. And it came as close as it ever did to actually passing. $5,000 per special ed kid is a help. One of the things that hurts though is the number of times that a student leaves us regular ed. And within a month, they're identified as special ed there, and then the billing has changed. There's nothing they can do about that either.
They don't get audited. Doesn't seem like it.
It doesn't seem
No,
like
it doesn't seem like it.
Next slide is the athletic fund expenditures, so this is all general fund, all these expenses that I'm telling you. We do have a separate athletic fund that the general fund pays for any coach's salaries, supplies, uniforms, equipment, anything that a coach would request during budget season. The athletic trainer also comes out of the general fund, but the athletic fund pays for officials, any kind of dues to WPIL or PIAA we would have to pay. So those two are separate entities. Currently, Mr. Regal gave me, we have a total number of 202 students in our student athletes. So our total budget for athletics is 420,000. So if you want to kind of look at an average, it's about 2,082 per student. Our co-op, he just gave me those numbers today. Our boys soccer, there are 12 students in that co-op, girls soccer is 7 students. Also a little note on the bottom there, the booster or club monies are all in the activities fund, that's a whole nother fund as well, so that's nothing that's in the general fund, and that's all handled by the principal secretary.
And that's not part of our budget,
No,
right?
no. What's that?
Totally off. I'll take it.
Okay. Alex did call me on the way, I was on the way home actually, and he said that he talked to, Southside, and that $2,000 cap, I guess is only good for the cycle, so after that, he said he thinks they're
They're
gonna,
gonna
yeah,
get up, yeah.
he just called me on the way home.
I figured it.
Next slide is our debt service payments, for the next few years, for last year and the next few years. 23-24, we paid 2.7 million, this year we're gonna end up paying 3.2, and that's pretty much how it stays the next few years.
What's the jump up there, Jamie? I thought we had a couple that were finishing off.
We borrowed money.
Yeah, that's
We borrowed
2.7
6
before the
something.
borrow, yeah.
Yeah, so the way to keep this in mind is that we borrowed that money and we'll pull down off of it every year so that we can pay back. And at the same time, hopefully the board continues to raise the millage so that those will offset. And and when you're on the back end of that 5-year period, we will be that much further ahead in terms of millage dollars that we'll be able to pay our debt service, but have the money to spend as well. So it's a convoluted way to do it, but we were at that.
The next slide's, a historical millage chart.
So I shared this with you sometime in the last 12 months about where we were. So if you look at it, there were back shortly after, I guess, the building up the high school was built. You know, in 11, 12, and 12, 13, there were no tax increases in those years. And then the tax increases went, and I don't know what you can see what the millage was in those different years. I don't know what the index was or what they could have raised it to, but you'll see the change, and then you'll see in the 17-18 school year, there was a reassessment. So on a $100,000 house, even though there was an increase in that year, there was actually a decrease in your tax bill, because with the way reassessments work in the Commonwealth, you can't have a windfall. So everything had to be recalculated. So that person in that $100,000 house actually had less of a tax bill to the tune of $183 less. And then, of course, you see the tax increases, and then when that year after the pandemic, there wasn't a tax increase. And then that next year, I think it was, we went half of the index, I think, that year, Jane, right? The year after there was no tax increase, you know, half of it.
Yeah.
And then the full to the index. That last part in there doesn't say, I mean, that's the budget that we're gonna build based upon, unless the board instructs me not to build upon that, but it's building a budget based on that, remembering that we borrowed the debt. Kind of to do that, if you look at the homestead, farmstead part about that though, in 23-24, if your primary residence qualified for the homestead, farmstead, and you were granted it, your tax bill was reduced by $272. So that would have been in the 23-24 school year. In the 24-25 school year, that homestead, farmstead went up by $54 to $32.26. So what that means in kind of practical dollars is, when you raised taxes last year on $100,000 house by $98, on your homestead, farmstead, your tax bill really only went up $50, because you were getting more in the homestead, farmstead, if that makes sense. But that gives you a little bit where we are. And obviously, that's on an example house, $100,000. If you're curious as to, you know, the tax bill on a property, that, say that 1526, just do a multiplier of to get, you know, what that tax bill is on that 100,000.
He went over the homestead farmstead, so we don't have to go over that. And the last few pages are just for your information, kind of my life every day, these account codes. Just in case you, are bored tonight and will study. And I usually give you the budget
Are you gonna
summary,
quiz
so you
us
can
on them?
see, what's that?
You gonna quiz us on that?
Yeah.
I'm sure you know them all by heart.
Yeah. So then it dives deeper into objects and everything else, so, but, just some information for you, of how I have to build everything. And we'll get,
I assume this will be online for parents.
Now that we've given it, yeah, I have, I cleaned the page up a little bit, I did not realize Mr. Monty Scotch to let me know that I still can't find that 21 budget, this current year's budget is on there. And I think now I have 2 years of these presentations on there, so, you know, folks, this board is pretty darn transparent as it is, you know.
Very much so.
And so, you know, was there any, though, other information that you need going into this budget season from Jamie, from me, from Melissa that could help you? Or any direction you want to provide us?
Just what we talked about.
yeah, I still do that, yeah.
There was a large special ed increase over last year's budget, the percentage was higher than anything else. So I
Okay.
asked Jamie.
They asked me to do a kind of breakdown of that 1,200 account.
Okay.
Just haven't gotten there yet, we've had
Yeah, it's
3
fine.
audits.
That's the only thing I was.
Yeah, I'm getting
Okay.
there.
Okay.
I have a question.
The spend increase is what
Yeah.
you're saying, or
Yeah.
the amount of students?
Yeah, the percentage was a lot higher than, what was budgeted, of what it had gone over, when I saw, let's see what the.
It could be a
reason was.
combination of things, so.
Okay.
Multiple times the auditors have told us that we need to take the activities funds because it is such a high number. And when do you think we need to address that? I mean,
2 years ago.
Yeah.
I mean, we need to
I know
take
we've
the
talked about it.
we
We've
need to
talked
take the
about
athletics out of it. But,
Didn't we talk about it in December, rolling it? We asked the auditors and we were like, he said, start with one and roll it. Wasn't that his advice?
I don't remember him saying that.
He said, don't just swoop them all out at once.
well, you can't do that.
Yeah, and he was like, start with like a smaller one and just keep hacking away kind of.
Yeah.
That's what he said.
Well, have each that group take it out themselves and get rid of it.
Yeah, that's what's gonna
Well,
happen. I mean, they
I
have to, 'cause they have to open up another account.
They do, and they should have a, I mean,
Oh, would it go
it
to that?
shouldn't matter.
would it go-
We don't
well,
care.
I mean, I
Say-
understand, like, some of them, I don't know that they'll ever be able to do with boosters.
Like for a basketball account, what would you do with that money? What would we do with the money? We can't give it to an outside group.
No, that's what I'm saying, like, if they would just come up with, hey, this is what we're saving for, this is what, have them create a budget and like what they're saving that money for. Like, say, I don't know, the Turtle Club, say they have $10,000 in there. Great, you've raised that amount of money, you have that money. What's your game plan with it? And have the students or whoever break down what the plan is. Are you preparing for a trip for the students? Are you preparing to build something for the turtles? Give us a game plan. Why do you keep fundraising when you have X amount of dollars? Or if you don't have this amount of money, why do you wanna raise money for what exact activity? I think that would break down a lot of.
Chris's question too, what would you do with that?
I would say just give it to have
Give it to
the
the
coach.
boosters.
No, give it to the coach and take his budget, use that as extra money for his budget.
well, that's what I would do with the,
I mean,
With the
whatever
account
group,
that's
with
in
whatever
the-
account, the
in-
account, yeah, the account that's in there.
so like, for
If
example,
basketball has 5,000 in their account, his budget for the following year is an extra 5, but that might be his whole budget.
there might be a small budget, yeah.
Till they spent, that's how I would say break down any extra money that's in the activities account. That coach, whoever's coming in would use it that way. And then there would be no more in there.
Right.
But I mean, if they are saving, like, say band or something, say they're wanting to plan a trip to Disney.
Yeah, well,
for-
band's not one of them.
I know, but I'm
yeah.
just, like, I'm just throwing a group, say they, cross country, say they wanna make a trip and they're gonna go and do like this huge big trip for all the students. And they need to have X amount of dollars. Okay, that makes sense for that amount of money to be held in that fund, in, for a deadline for that one?
Well, the auditors will tell you that, you know, student activity should not carry over from,
Right,
the
I was
reality,
gonna
it
say
should
that.
not.
Right.
It should go to zero. So it either goes to zero, or you have the officers or student representatives from this year gifted to next year's. There should be a paper trail of that, where it's a
Which makes
rollover every year. But it should go out at zero. Most don't, but we have, what,
Those
$200,000
students can enjoy what they
in there?
raise the money
Yes.
for,
Yeah.
technically, that's.
Right,
what's-
that's,
right.
and
Yeah.
that's another thing too,
Makes sense.
like, when there's X amount of dollars, okay, if you're planning something big, say for 10,000, 5,000, whatever, then let the
Put
kids
it into a
enjoy it.
scholarship?
Well, they can do whatever, the students can do,
Yeah,
you know.
it's, depends on.
But for example, you know,
It's their account.
cross-country is sitting at $10,200.
Right. For what?
You know, exactly. I don't even know how, I mean, this goes back years, so I don't know, you know, how this was raised, what this was raised. You know, it jumped up a little bit in 22, 23, then 23, 24, it went up again. But I mean, it's, things that are in here are things like,
Is that a dual account? Like, is
senior
cross-country
gifts,
and track
senior
together?
bands. I don't think track's in with this.
Track is separate,
They're
but they
separate?
fundraise together for the turkey trot and then split the proceeds.
So, you know, one of the ways to do it is to start like, so fundraiser from the turkey trot, right, brought in $4,700 for cross-country. So that took them up to $10,500. But they already had $5,000 they couldn't use, why
Right.
did you raise, you know?
Right. I know Quantum, like, if they wanna buy uniforms, and if it's not in the budget for this year for the athletics and stuff like that, I know not every year you're gonna get uniforms. If that's what they wanna do, then get the uniforms. If you wanna do this, then spend the money. I just think they're saving it for a rainy day, but when's the rainy day?
Anything else? Can I switch gears just very quickly before you close out?
Well, I was gonna say, let's close out and turn that off.
Okay.
Is that
Then I
good?
can say this, yeah.
Yeah. All right, may I have a motion to